Why aren't Russian troops allowed to have beards? How is Boris Johnson still intervening in the war in Ukraine? And does the war mean we're getting closer to Doomsday? I'm Dan Quinnell for talkTV, and here's the latest news from the war in Ukraine. With a new offensive expected once the weather warms up, you'd think Russia's commanders would be busy preparing, but they've still found the time to make sure their troops are clean-shaven on the battlefield. General Valery Gerasimov has told his soldiers to shave their beards to improve their day-to-day discipline.
It's bizarre only in the sense that he actually wants his army to be professional. It sounds ridiculous, but I mean, he actually, in the British troops on the Somme shaved. He just wants to insist that his army actually does not become a sort of ragtag bunch of irregulars.
It's not gone down well. Russia's defence chiefs have been called a bunch of clowns by the head of the Wagner Group and their mercenaries that usually support the Kremlin. Soldiers stationed in eastern Ukraine say the rules are a farce, while the head of troops in Chechnya says the order is an insult to his Muslim soldiers. Boris Johnson isn't letting his influence fade in Ukraine despite not being Prime Minister anymore.
Well, I can tell you that the UK will be sticking by Ukraine for as long as it takes.
Великобританія буде на боці України, скільки на це потребується часу.
You are going to win, and you're going to get all the Russians out of your country, but we will be there for the long term, and we will also want to be helping you to reconstruct.
Now the former occupant of 10 Downing Street wants Ukraine to join NATO. He was apprehensive about the idea when he was Prime Minister, but writing in the Daily Mail today, Boris Johnson called for Ukraine to join the military alliance for the sake of long-term peace, and said the war is a direct result of Russia's neighbour not being in the club. Johnson's also had a swipe at Germany and the US, who are reluctant to donate tanks that Ukraine is asking for. President Volodymyr Zelensky thinks 300 tanks from the West would be enough for his country to defeat Russia. They're specifically asking for Leopard 2 tanks, which are made by Germany and are designed to compete with Russia's T-90s. They're owned by countries all over Europe, but anyone who wants to send them has to get permission from Germany first, and they're worried that supplying their tanks could escalate the conflict with Russia.
Allow me one remark, because the question will come up anyway. The question on Leopard tanks. There's not yet a new position. I've always said that I'm counting on a decision being made soon, and that remains my view.
Poland's now officially asked for permission to send them to the front line. It raises pressure on Germany to come to a decision. And after a summit failed to find a breakthrough over the weekend, NATO's Secretary General is still optimistic about a deal.
We discussed the issue of battle tanks. Consultations among allies will continue, and I'm confident that we will have a solution soon. Russia is preparing for new offensives. We need to enable the Ukrainians soon or fast to be able to repel those offensives, and also enable them to liberate their own territory.
It's thought that any tanks will need to be sent soon to give enough time for Ukraine to train its troops. And we've moved closer to Doomsday, mostly because of the war in Ukraine. That's according to a group called the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. Every year they decide how close humanity is to a doomsday scenario. When it was first made in 1947, it was designed to warn the world about the threat of nuclear war. And now the scientists say we've entered a new period of nuclear danger not seen since the Cold War. They've moved the Doomsday Clock to the closest it's ever been to midnight, just 90 seconds away. That's all the latest from the war in Ukraine from talkTV.